Mayon Volcano's 47-day eruption is not stopping. And what is happening right now on the Philippines' most dangerous volcano has scientists more alarmed than at any point in the last 15 years. Incandescent lava is cascading down its slopes every single night. The ground beneath the mountain keeps swelling. Pyroclastic flows are racing down the flanks faster than anything recorded during the last crisis. And Alert Level 3 refuses to drop, because every instrument surrounding that mountain is screaming that something far worse is still building underneath. 80,000 people have already fled their homes. Entire villages sit completely empty. Farms that took generations to build now sit abandoned inside a danger zone patrolled by armed military around the clock. And the numbers coming out of Mayon right now are breaking records that stood for over a decade. 5,533 tons of sulfur dioxide are escaping from that crater every single day. To put that in perspective, 6 weeks ago, that number was 195 tons. That is a 28-fold increase in just over 5 weeks, and it is still climbing. But here is what has volcanologists in complete panic. That gas is not just pollution. It is a signal. It is the volcano revealing exactly what is happening deep underground. And what it is saying is that massive amounts of fresh magma are surging toward the surface right now. Not slowing down, not running out, building. An endless supply of molten rock feeding this eruption from reservoirs so deep that 47 days of continuous activity has not even come close to emptying them. The lava dome sitting at the summit has already grown to 3.2 million cubic meters of unstable volcanic material, perched more than 2,000 meters above the communities below. To understand why that matters, consider this. In 1984, the dome reached 2.8 million cubic meters before it catastrophically collapsed, sending superheated pyroclastic flows racing 7 kilometers down the mountain. That dome was smaller than the one sitting up there right now, and today's dome is still growing with every passing hour. Scientists are watching the same warning patterns repeat, the same seismic signatures, the same ground deformation, the same deadly buildup. And the most terrifying part? Nobody can say when this ends. The volcano keeps its own schedule, completely indifferent to the 80,000 families sleeping on gymnasium floors, waiting for a mountain to decide their fate. So here is the question that no scientist can answer right now. Is Mayon's 47-day nightmare finally approaching its peak? Or are we watching the calm before an eruption that buries everything in its path? January 6th, 2026, 1:20 p.m. local time. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology raises Mayon to Alert Level 3. Within hours, pyroclastic density currents begin generating from the collapsing lava dome, racing down Bonga Gully on the volcano's southeast flank. The crisis begins. That was 47 days ago. What has happened since then is not what anyone expected. In the first 24 hours after the alert level was raised, monitoring stations record 100 pyroclastic density currents in a single day. Scientists who have studied Mayon for decades describe the intensity as exceptional. The first ashfall dusts the villages of Bususay and Daga. Emergency evacuations displace 3,476 residents from communities sitting within the 6-kilometer permanent danger zone. Families leave with whatever they can carry. Most expect to be home within days. Week 2 brings no relief. Activity intensifies rather than subsides. Sulfur dioxide emissions climb above the 195 tons per day baseline that scientists recorded in early January. Evacuation zones expand as pyroclastic flows begin traveling farther down the mountain slopes. The pattern that should show declining activity after an initial burst instead shows acceleration. The volcano is not releasing pressure, it is building it. By week 3, the ground itself begins to move. GPS stations and electronic tilt meters detect accelerating inflation in the volcano's eastern sectors. The earth beneath Mayon is swelling outward, pushed by magma pressure rising from reservoirs deep below. The danger zone extends beyond 6 kilometers in sectors where pyroclastic currents have traveled farthest. Evacuee numbers climb past 15,000. Officials expand shelter operations. Nobody is talking about going home anymore. Week 4 shatters every earlier projection. Displacement surges beyond 25,000 people. Emergency shelters strain against capacity limits. Sulfur dioxide crosses 1,000 tons per day. scientists begin recognizing that this eruption is fundamentally different from the 2023 crisis that lasted 6 months at alert level 3. That eruption never produced sulfur dioxide readings approaching current levels. That eruption involved surface lava movement without the deep magma supply now actively feeding Mayon's crater. This is something else entirely. Weeks 5 and 6 bring the numbers that alarm the international volcanological community. Evacuee totals reach 80,000 displaced residents across multiple municipalities. Sulfur dioxide peaks at 5,533 tons per day, the highest reading recorded at Mayon in 15 years. Research institutions from Japan, the United States, and Europe request immediate access to monitoring data. The scientific world is watching. 47 days after that first alert, the situation is unchanged in one critical way. Magma supply shows no indication of exhaustion. The deep reservoir continues feeding fresh molten rock toward the surface. The volcano is not finished. It has not even slowed down. 5,533 tons every single day. That is the number that changed everything. To understand why that figure has volcanologists losing sleep, you first need to understand what sulfur dioxide actually reveals. When magma rises from deep chambers toward the surface, dissolved gases escape first. Sulfur dioxide concentration tells scientists exactly how much fresh molten rock is actively moving beneath the crater. The higher the reading, the larger the magma supply feeding the eruption. It is not just a measurement. It is the volcano's confession, broadcasting in real time exactly what is happening thousands of meters underground. On January 8th, instruments measured 195 tons per day. Elevated, but within expected parameters for alert level 3 activity. Scientists monitored the numbers carefully, but without alarm. 5 weeks later, that reading hits 5,533 tons per day, a multiplication so dramatic that scientists initially questioned their own instruments. The highest sulfur dioxide emission recorded at Mayon since 2011. Scientists who have spent careers studying this volcano describe the jump as unlike anything in their professional experience. That 2011 comparison is not a reassuring one. Elevated sulfur dioxide that year preceded an eruption that forced evacuations lasting months and caused widespread agricultural devastation across Albay province. The same gas, the same pattern, the same deadly buildup now repeating itself with even higher numbers. Dr. Teresito Bicol, director of the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, addressed the implications directly during a February 12th briefing. Sustained emissions at this level indicate an open conduit system. Magma is not trapped beneath a sealed dome. It is actively circulating, degassing continuously, and being resupplied from reservoirs deep beneath the volcano. The mountain is not exhausting a finite batch of molten rock. Fresh magma keeps arriving. The sulfur dioxide readings are only part of the picture. Monitoring stations recorded 847 rockfall events in the past 24 hours alone. Ground deformation data confirms what scientists feared most. GPS measurements and electronic tilt meters show the volcano's edifice has been inflating continuously since June 2024. The eastern and southeastern sectors display the most pronounced swelling. Magma pressure is not decreasing, it is building. Seismic instruments detect an average of 47 volcanic earthquakes daily. Each tremor represents magma and volcanic gases surging beneath the surface. The mountain is not resting between episodes. It is actively feeding fresh molten rock toward the crater at rates that alarm every scientist who has monitored Mayon across decades of eruption cycles. The numbers tell a single, unavoidable story. This eruption is not winding down. It is intensifying. And nothing in the data suggests that is about to change. The lava dome at Mayon's summit is the most dangerous object on the mountain. Scientists describe it in those exact terms, not as a hazard, not as a concern, but as an active threat that grows more structurally compromised with every passing hour. At 3.2 million cubic meters of unstable volcanic material sitting 2,462 meters above sea level, it represents the single most consequential variable in this entire crisis. To understand why that number keeps volcanologists awake at night, you need to understand what a lava dome actually is. When thick, viscous magma pushes toward the surface but cannot flow freely, it piles up at the crater, forming a bulging mass of solidified rock on the outside and superheated molten material within. It is not stable. It never was. The pressure beneath it builds continuously, and the outer shell that contains it grows more fractured and compromised with every new surge of magma from below. A lava dome is not a cap on the eruption. It is a loaded weapon. The history of this particular dome makes the current situation even more alarming. In 1984, Mayon's lava dome reached 2.8 million cubic meters before it catastrophically collapsed in a single event. That collapse generated pyroclastic density currents, superheated avalanches of gas, ash, and volcanic debris that raced 7 kilometers down the mountain slopes, destroying everything in their path. The 1984 eruption forced evacuations lasting months and left a permanent scar on the collective memory of every community living in Mayon's shadow. The 1984 dome measured 2.8 million cubic meters at the moment of collapse. The dome sitting above Mayon's crater today has already exceeded that volume, and it has not yet collapsed. The seismic data surrounding the dome makes the comparison to 1984 impossible to ignore. Dr. Maria Antonia Bornes, Chief of Volcano Monitoring and Eruption Prediction at PHIVOLCS, has identified disturbing parallels between current instrument readings and the signatures recorded in the weeks before the 1984 eruption. Harmonic tremors indicating sustained magma movement. Volcanic earthquakes clustering at shallow depths beneath the summit. Ground deformation accelerating in specific sectors directly beneath the dome's base. These are not coincidental patterns. They are a recognizable sequence that this volcano has performed before. Pyroclastic density currents are already racing down Mayon's flanks at rates exceeding anything documented during the 2023 crisis. The permanent 6-kilometer danger zone remains strictly enforced, with military checkpoints and armed personnel patrolling the perimeter around the clock. But pyroclastic flows have already traveled beyond those boundaries in the sectors where activity is most intense. PHIVOLCS monitors 3 specific triggers that would immediately escalate the alert to level 4. Rapid dome growth beyond current rates. Escalating harmonic tremor intensity. Ground deformation accelerating past established thresholds. Any single one of those signals indicates an imminent hazardous eruption. Right now, all 3 are moving in the wrong direction. Behind every number in this crisis stands a person. 80,000 displaced residents. 19,847 families. 23 times the initial evacuation count from January 6th. Each statistic represents someone who watched their home disappear in the rearview mirror with no certainty of return. The numbers are staggering. The faces behind them are harder to look at. Rosa Martinez is 67 years old. She has survived 3 Mayon eruptions across 6 decades of life on the volcano's fertile slopes. She knows this mountain better than most scientists who study it. On January 7th, she evacuated from Barangay Mabinit in Legazpi City, carrying a single plastic bag. Inside it, her medications, her husband's death certificate, and a photograph of her children's baptism. Those were the things she chose when she had minutes to decide what her life was worth carrying. 47 days later, she sleeps on a gymnasium floor in Tabaco City, alongside 340 other evacuees. Her farm sits empty inside the danger zone. Her carabao was relocated to a temporary livestock facility 15 kilometers away. She checks her phone for PHIVOLCS updates before sunrise every single morning. 8-year-old Marco Dela Cruz has not attended school since January 6th. He has nightmares about the volcano. He refuses to sleep without the lights on. Provincial health officials document a 180% increase in pediatric anxiety cases at evacuation center medical stations across Albay province. Counseling resources cannot come close to meeting the demand. Marco asks his mother every day when they can go home. She does not have an answer. The shelter conditions compound the suffering. 13 government evacuation centers now house populations exceeding their designed overcapacity by 200%. Tabaco City Sports Complex holds 2,100 residents inside a facility built for 800. Families sleep on cardboard laid across concrete floors. Portable toilets serve ratios of 1 unit per 85 people. The smell of confined humanity mixes with sulfur drifting from the mountain that put them there. The economic devastation runs deeper than the immediate crisis. Coconut plantations, abaca fields, and rice paddies, representing generations of accumulated labor, sit completely abandoned inside the danger zone. The Albay Provincial Agriculture Office estimates 127 million pesos in crop losses during the first month alone. That number climbs with every passing day that families cannot return. Small farms that survived for generations now face losses that no relief pack can address. Governor Noel Rosal assures evacuees that relief supplies remain sustainable even for extended displacement. The Department of Social Welfare and Development has distributed 45,000 food packs. Water trucks service shelters twice daily. But sustainability is not the same as dignity. And dignity is what 47 days on a gymnasium floor slowly, quietly destroys. The volcano decides when they go home. They do not. The church bell tower still stands. Protruding from volcanic debris in the town of Cagsawa, it is the only visible remnant of an entire community that ceased to exist in minutes. In 1814, Mayon erupted with a violence so absolute that it buried the town completely, killing approximately 1,200 people before most of them understood what was happening. 2 centuries later, that bell tower remains, not as a tourist attraction, but as a warning that this mountain has always been capable of erasing human life at a scale that defies comprehension. Mayon has erupted 54 times since 1616. Every single eruption eventually ended. Communities rebuilt during the quiet periods, returned to the fertile volcanic soil, and planted new crops on the slopes of the mountain that had just tried to kill them. Then the cycle began again. The history of Mayon is not a history of disaster. It is a history of repetition. The same patterns, the same warnings, the same deadly buildup appearing across centuries with the mechanical consistency of something that was never going to stop. The 1897 eruption killed over 400 people. The 1984 event forced evacuations that lasted months and left communities across Albay province fighting to recover their livelihoods. But of all the historical precedents surrounding Mayon's current activity, it is 1984 that scientists keep returning to. The seismic signatures detected in the weeks before that eruption now match the patterns appearing on monitoring instruments today. Scientists describe the overlap as not coincidental, the same underground fingerprint of a volcano preparing to release accumulated pressure in a single violent event. Dr. Maria Antonia Bornas, Chief of Volcano Monitoring and Eruption Prediction at PHIVOLCS, describes the comparison as deeply concerning. What makes the current eruption distinctly more alarming than its predecessors' scale? When Cagsawa was buried in 1814, the region surrounding Mayon supported a fraction of the population living there today. When the 1984 eruption forced its evacuations, the communities in Mayon's shadow were significantly smaller. Today, over 400,000 people live within 20 kilometers of the crater. A major eruption would not threaten a town. It would threaten an entire region across multiple provinces. The 2023 eruption that kept Mayon at alert level 3 for 6 months offers the most recent point of comparison, and it offers no comfort. That eruption never produced sulfur dioxide readings approaching current levels. It involved surface lava extrusion without the deep magma supply now actively feeding the crater. Scientists who monitored 2023 closely described the current activity as fundamentally different in character and scale. The international volcanological community has taken notice. Research institutions from Japan, the United States, and Europe have all requested access to PHIVOLCS monitoring data. The consensus emerging from that international consultation offers no reassurance. The historical record does not calm fears about Mayon. It amplifies them. Scientists at PHIVOLCS have modeled 3 possible trajectories for Mayon's ongoing eruption. Each scenario carries profoundly different consequences for the 80,000 displaced residents waiting in evacuation shelters across Albay province. None of them offer easy comfort, and only one of them ends without catastrophe. Scenario 1 offers cautious hope. Sulfur dioxide emissions gradually decline over coming weeks, signaling that the deep magma reservoir is finally beginning to exhaust its supply. The lava dome stabilizes through slow, controlled extrusion rather than catastrophic structural collapse. Pyroclastic activity decreases to levels that permit phased return of evacuees living closest to danger zone boundaries. This pattern mirrors the 2023 eruption that maintained alert level 3 for 6 months before eventually de-escalating. It is the outcome every displaced family is praying for. It is also the outcome that current data does not support. Scenario 2 extends the crisis indefinitely. Current activity persists for 6 months or longer. Sulfur dioxide remains elevated. The dome continues growing without catastrophic failure. Evacuees face displacement measured in seasons rather than weeks. Farms go untended through the planting cycle. Businesses remain shuttered. Children fall further behind in their education. Economic devastation compounds quietly, day after day, in ways that relief packs cannot address. Widespread casualties are avoided through sustained evacuation enforcement, but the damage to livelihoods, mental health, and community cohesion accumulates into a disaster of its own kind. Scenario 3 is the nightmare that no one in Albay province allows themselves to speak aloud. Complete dome collapse in a single catastrophic event. Pyroclastic density currents exceeding temperatures of 1,000 degrees Celsius race down Mayon slopes at speeds surpassing 100 kilometers per hour. Anyone within 6 kilometers dies instantly. Warning time could be minutes. It could be 0. A VAI-4 eruption would devastate the entire Bicol region, affecting populations across 3 provinces and potentially disrupting aviation throughout Southeast Asia. This is not a remote theoretical possibility. It is a scenario that the current dome size, the current seismic signatures, and the current ground deformation data all make scientifically credible. Beyond these 3 scenarios lies an additional threat that extends the danger far past any eruption's immediate timeline. The approaching rainy season transforms accumulated volcanic debris into lahars, volcanic mudflows that follow river channels downstream at tremendous velocity, threatening communities far beyond the permanent danger zone. Lahar risk persists for years after initial eruption activity subsides. The mountain's danger does not end when the lava stops. PHIVOLCS requires 3 specific conditions before modifying evacuation orders: sustained decline in seismic activity, ground deformation reversal, measurable reduction in sulfur dioxide emissions. None of these conditions currently exist. The volcano keeps its own schedule. Science can only watch and report what it sees. The Philippine government is not watching Mayon from a distance. It is fully mobilized, operating at crisis level across every department and agency with any capacity to respond. The scale of that response reflects the scale of the disaster it is trying to contain. The Department of National Defense has deployed 2,400 military personnel across Albay province. Army trucks transport evacuees from danger zone perimeters to shelter facilities. Helicopter assets remain positioned at Legazpi Airport, ready for emergency extraction operations if the situation escalates beyond current parameters. Armed forces of the Philippines units patrol the 6-kilometer permanent danger zone around the clock, preventing unauthorized re-entry by residents desperate to check on farms, livestock, and homes they left behind 47 days ago. Every person stopped at those checkpoints represents a life potentially saved. Every person who slips through represents a life at risk. Governor Noel Rosal coordinates daily briefings connecting 47 local government units across affected areas through a communication network that operates 24 hours a day. Municipal mayors and barangay captains feed information up through the chain. Decisions affecting tens of thousands of residents flow back down. The coordination is extensive, professional, and under enormous strain. The Department of Social Welfare and Development has released 89 million pesos in emergency assistance since January 6th. Field offices distribute family food packs, hygiene kits, and sleeping materials to evacuation centers across 6 municipalities. Mobile medical teams rotate through shelters, providing primary care and medication refills for residents whose chronic conditions do not pause because a volcano is erupting. The Department of Agriculture has declared a state of calamity for agricultural areas within the extended danger zone. Preliminary crop damage assessments exceed 180 million pesos. Over 3,400 cattle, caribou, and goats have been relocated to temporary holding facilities outside affected areas. The disruption extends into education and infrastructure. 47,000 students across 312 public and private schools within evacuation zones have not attended classes since the crisis began. Distance learning protocols have been activated, but internet connectivity in rural evacuation shelters remains deeply inconsistent. The Department of Public Works and Highways has reinforced critical bridges and positioned heavy equipment for rapid debris clearing as ashfall continues to accumulate on road networks, requiring constant monitoring. Aviation authorities have modified flight paths for aircraft approaching Legazpi Airport. The 1,500-meter volcanic plume and drifting ash require pilots to maintain increased distance from the summit. Contingency plans exist for complete airport closure if eruption intensity escalates further. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs monitors the situation from Manila. International assistance protocols remain on standby pending a Philippine government request. 47 days of sustained crisis now strains resources designed for emergencies measured in days, not months. The systems are holding. But holding is not the same as solving, and the mountain has not finished deciding how long this lasts. Tonight, above the northeastern Philippines, Mayon Volcano glows red against the darkness. The incandescent dome pulses with heat visible from 30 kilometers away. The sulfur smell reaches communities that have lived with this mountain their entire lives. Pyroclastic flows trace bright lines down the flanks in the darkness, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. The same silhouette that draws tourists from around the world now serves as a warning beacon for the hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadow. The eruption continues. It has continued for 47 days. And nothing in the data suggests tomorrow will be different. At monitoring stations positioned around the volcano's flanks, instruments never stop. Seismographs trace every tremor moving through the rock beneath the mountain. GPS receivers measure every millimeter of ground swelling outward under magma pressure. Spectrometers sample every ton of sulfur dioxide escaping from the crater into the atmosphere above Albay province. The surveillance never sleeps. Scientists watch data streams that never pause, looking for the signal that tells them which of the three scenarios is unfolding. The numbers keep moving in the wrong direction. The reservoir is not empty. The dome is not stable. The ground is not done swelling. Rosa Martinez still wakes before sunrise, waiting for news that has not come. Marco de la Cruz still cannot picture the bedroom he left behind 47 days ago. Farmers across Albay province calculate losses that compound with each sunrise they spend away from fields they cannot reach. The waiting erodes hope in increments too small to measure, but too constant to ignore. 47 days of uncertainty does something to a person that relief packs and water trucks cannot fix. It dismantles the quiet assumption that life will return to normal and replaces it with something much harder to live with. Yet the communities surrounding Mayon have endured this before. They have rebuilt after every eruption across 4 centuries of recorded history. They have returned to the slopes that threaten to kill them because those slopes are the only place their lives make sense. The resilience is not ignorance of danger. It is clear-eyed acceptance that this mountain is home, despite everything it threatens to take, despite every eruption cycle that forces them to choose between economic survival and physical survival on identical coordinates. Mayon will eventually quiet. It always has. The next eruption will eventually come. It always does. But right now, in this moment, 80,000 people remain suspended in crowded gymnasiums, waiting for answers that only the mountain can give. The instruments keep recording. The scientists keep watching. The people keep waiting. 47 days. The eruption continues, and the mountain has not finished speaking.